Andrea Masterson. I'm the donor engagement consultant on the board of directors of KYIEP Advocate. I'm here again with our host, Shannon Masterson. She is the founder and executive director of KYIEP Advocate. And today I was just asking her a lot of questions so that I am always trying to understand what she's doing, what's going on, what is important about it, what are the gaps that she fills, and those kinds of things. So I thought that might be a good place for us to start today with just how does this all work? What are the basic rights? Where do they come from? So can you just start by kind of just walking us through that part of it?
So there are federal regulations that guide everything that we are talking about in the special education process at the school level. So you have if you think about a tiered system, here I am talking with my hands. If you think about a tiered system or an umbrella system, either way, you have the US Department of Education and the Office for Civil Rights. And those are your federal organizations that will bring down to state level regulations. So in Kentucky, we have Kentucky administrative regulations. So there's a lot of numbers, they all mean something. And if I was an attorney, I could probably tell you what they meant, but I do know that it starts KAR with some numbers, and that's how you find your state regulations. And then underneath that, you'll have school board policies and procedures that each school district will create based on the state and the federal regulations. And then after that, you'll have your own school site policies and procedures that are all ideally in alignment with your school board policies, your state regulations that are also in alignment with the federal regulations.
And how does that all fit into this IEP special education process? This is probably a great example of like why you're needed. Like what does that mean? How does that all work together?
So the policies and procedures about the process are all outlined in federal regulations from the US Department of Education. When you see the acronym IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, that's the federal regulations from the US Department of Education. So they're telling you who should be in these meetings about IEPs, what each service provider is responsible for, how an IEP is developed, what are the timelines for your school district. And then moving down from those federal guidelines, your state legislators, I don't know how that, I am not in on that, but your state guidelines and your state regulations.
Yeah.
They are, your legislators are moving forward. They are defining and redefining policies and procedures legislatively in your state. Those things have to be in alignment with the federal regulations. So you cannot do worse as a state than the federal regulations. You can do better. So if you're talking about timelines, you could have a 60-day timeline federally from IDEA. And then your state could even say, you know what, we're not going to do 60. Our state's going to do 45. But you can't do 70. So you can't extend out a timeline, but you could make that timeline shorter and do better than the federal regulations. And so those processes are all just trickled down through all of these levels, which is also why it feels like it's muddy sometimes, because it's like a game of telephone along with a lot of interpretations with attorneys. So you have these federal regulations, and then the states will determine what they mean, and they'll make their own regulations. And then the school districts with their attorneys will determine what those mean, and they'll make their own policies and procedures. And then schools will ideally fall in line with their own school board policies and procedures. So it does feel like a bit of a game of telephone at times, but also to be said that each state is governed by the same federal government and the same IDEA regulations.
Yeah, but it already seems nuanced. I know you started so basic and so high level, but it already seems so convoluted. And again, I'm trying to put myself in the position of like a new parent trying to understand how this all works, what's supposed to happen. Like I'm already wanting someone to follow and like walk me through what this even means, how it all works together, because it seems complicated.
It does seem complicated, and it's probably even more complicated if you're a parent of a child who has needs outside of school. So then you're navigating your own state health system, and you're navigating your own family dynamics that maybe aren't what you thought they would be. And now you're going to school with a toddler, a preschool kid, or, elementary, middle, or high school, who knows? But now you're going to school, and this just likely feels like another thing on your plate. The beauty of this being the other thing is that there are federal regulations and state regulations and school board policies and procedures that are all in place to ensure that students have access to education. So those things exist. Whether or not you see the fruits of that and whether or not you see that actually happening at your school in your kids' day-to-day education can feel like a negotiation, but those things exist. The framework for educating students does exist. How you do it and how you spend your money on it is that negotiation piece that feels disheartening at times. But sometimes it's helpful to know that while this is another conversation that parents have to be having, and it's another meeting that you have to go to, and it's another time, unfortunately, the way our education system is set up, you talk about the things that your kid is not able to do. That doesn't always feel good. But knowing that there are policies and procedures that are put in place to ensure access to an equitable education, those things already exist. It's just knowing how to navigate that system and negotiate a quality education for your kid, which feels like you shouldn't have to do. But the reality is we sit here having this conversation because you actually do have to do that sometimes.
Yeah. One of the things that I wrote down when you and I were talking about earlier was, you said rights exist for you whether or not you know about them. And I just thought that that was so telling, that one of the examples that you and I talk about a lot is people who might not be native English speakers, and like you're handed documents and they have your rights, they have the procedures, they have what's going to happen, and you already right off the bat are at a disadvantage because you're not able to read and comprehend those things, or whatever the hurdle might be. It might be that, but it might just also be you don't know. So I'll also give another plug to your website, that you've got resources that kind of help you navigate this, that are free to access for anyone. But there's a need for an advocate, there's a need for someone to help you guide through the situation, but because it already on the surface is complicated.
Yeah, it does. There are a lot of rules and regulations and policies and procedures that do exist without a parent knowing about them. And one of those things that does exist is the procedural safeguards document that the district provides to parents. So that exists whether or not you read it. Your rights within it exist whether or not you know about those rights, and whether or not you know really how they pertain to your own situation and how you can use them in your own situation. So the district has to give a copy of the procedural safeguards to parents at least once per year. For the most part, those are provided at the beginning of every meeting, just, because it's easy to do. And then if you do it before every meeting, then they know they've done it at least once per year. I do know now, if you're not physically going to a meeting, that sometimes when you get that meeting notice in your email that says, here's the proposed date and time, you'll get an attachment of the procedural safeguards with that. So they've just ensured that they've given them to you. Also, their responsibility to explain them to you. But in many cases, when I was a provider in the schools, and now talking to people who are in meetings and they're asking me questions about the procedural safeguards, a lot of parents don't even know that that document that says procedural safeguard notice is the parent rights in this process. So your district says, do you want a copy of your procedural safeguards or the procedural safeguards? And as a parent, you're like, I don't think I need to know what your own policies and procedures are. So do your job. not maybe recognizing that this is a 35-page document that outlines all of the rights of a parent in this process. Also, there's this very common conversation that happens. I don't know where it comes from, but it's happening across the state that, if you've been in this process for a while and they hand you these at least once per year, but likely more than once because you're meeting more than once, and they say, I got to give these to you. I have to give them to you every time, but you don't need any more of these. We kill trees with these. You have enough copies you could wallpaper your bathroom. You don't need these. And when somebody says that to you, I'm sure your first instinct is, okay, you're right. I don't want to do
You're
that.
the expert.
I don't need them. Yeah.
Mhm.
I'll let me know that I don't need them. But then what that also tells the team is you don't have access to your rights at your fingertips. Not that you're going to flip through them and you're going to try to figure out what these things are and what they mean and how they really relate to what's happening in this meeting at the same time. But if you say no to a copy of your rights, that just sets a precedent that you aren't interested in them. So even if you don't read them, just take them. Just take them.
Yeah.
So you can have them.
Key takeaways already. Procedural safeguard notice equals parental rights. When they give you the things that they have to give you at least one time per year, take them. They have to explain it to you. So if you're unclear about anything, ask questions. Ask for an explanation. Are there other kind of like high level things that you find yourself like telling almost every parent or guardian that comes to you? Like, are there like super common things that you're just a broken record saying?
Keep your communication in writing.
That's a great one.
We are in the day and age that a phone call is very rarely more convenient than a text message or an email. So if you send an email, so if you're operating and they keep everything in writing, then you send the email and you get a phone call back, it's not likely because that phone call is more convenient for anybody. So keep all of the communication in writing. Not to say don't answer that phone call. Absolutely answer that phone call and pull up your phone, put it on speakerphone, pull up your phone and start taking notes about this meeting. And email the person who called you back and say, thank you so much for taking time to meet with me today. Just wanted to review. This is what we talked about. Here's what you're going to do. Here's what I'm going to do. And we're going to talk next week.
Yeah. And that's another thing that's so basic, but also like leaps and bounds helpful to just take some notes, especially if I imagine that when people come to you for next steps of like, all right, here's the situation, here's where I need help. If they've got notes, if they have paperwork, you can kind of like read through and see like, oh, I see the situation, or I see the gap that exists, or I see whatever happens. And kind of what I'm hearing you say, I think, is in these meetings and throughout the process, the parents have a right and the ability to drive things forward. And if they are pushing for something for their kid or maybe not for their kid, then that is the right of the parents to interject and say, hey, hold on, I think it's better if this, or can we talk about this other situation? Is that right?
Yes, they're IEP team members in Kentucky. First, an acronym drop. Another one is ARC. That's what that's the Admissions Release Committee. That's what our team, and that's what the meeting is called, an ARC meeting. You talk about your IEP at the ARC meeting. In Missouri, they call them ARD meetings. I think there's something also called an RED meeting, but so it is just a bunch of, alphabet soup around. And again, if you don't know what these things are, how would you know that they're important to you? Yeah. So knowing who is a part of the team, when you sit down at this table or you get on a screen with these people, you are as just a part of the team as everybody else is. So you can ask at any point, what else have we considered? Why did we make this decision? What else did we talk about instead? And it is received very differently if your conversation is, why did we decide that? what else did you think about doing, and why did you not do those things? We were talking about Easter eggs earlier. Easter egg, that's prior written notice. That's the very first part of your procedural safeguards, is prior written notice. When the district proposes a change, they tell you what it is. They tell you the things they considered. They tell you why they rejected the other things. And they document that. So if they never explain the procedural safeguards to you, how do you know that the very first part is pretty important as part of you being a team member? So asking those questions. Why not? Why are we not doing this? Like, sometimes that's almost a more valuable question. If you have a child who has dyslexia, we'll get to the evaluation process eventually, but kid has a diagnosis of dyslexia, and you're looking for an approach that is evidence-based that's going to teach your kid how to read. Sure, you could go to a meeting and you could say, do this. And there is value in really trying to, drive that bus and direct this and get them to agree with you. But there's also a lot of value in saying, why are we not doing Wilson, Barton, or Orton Gillingham?
What are those?
Why?
What does that mean?
The approaches to teach kids with dyslexia
Okay, great.
how to read.
Thank you.
So you can go in and you can say, these are the things that you need to do. Or you can say, help me understand why you're not doing these. And, if you're looking at building a bridge with somebody and you're looking at being a good team member, you get what you give in this world. One of my favorite moms of one of my OT kids says that all the time. You get what you give in this world. So if you go in and you're pointing at people and you're like, do this, they're going to be like, we're not, and they match your energy.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it's very valuable to go in and be like, did you consider this? Yes, we did. Oh, why did you reject it? Oh, because we don't do that. Oh, tell me more about that. And being able to have those conversations that are more inquisitive and less accusatory is just going to probably get you a lot farther.
Yeah. I think it's really telling if there's language about like, this is a team decision, we're at a team meeting, we're deciding and we're agreeing upon what the next steps are. That includes the parents. That's not you're being told what to do, even if maybe it comes off that way. Like, a part of being a good team is listening to your teammates and paying attention to their strengths and their shortfalls and the things that they need and their priorities and all those things. So like, I think that's one thing that I've been really lucky to watch you in your element, talking to parents and talking to folks all around this process. Is part of what you do is like, you're almost like a hype girl in ways, but like, here are facts and resources, but like, hey, you got this, you can ask this question, or if you don't understand something, like, just ask about it. Or if you've got a thought or an idea, like, your thought and your idea is just as value as everyone else that is sitting in that meeting. And I think that I imagine that would be really important to know as kind of a parent walking into those meetings. Well,
Mhm.
and that's probably another good question is, I ask language. I say this to Shannon behind the scenes all the time. Like, am I using the right language here? Am I talking about this in the right way? So I want to make sure that this is like a safe space to like ask questions and learn more. So that's my question to you is, am I using the right terminology by saying like parent guardian? Am I excluding anyone with that?
No, the parent rights. There are
Parent rights.
educational decision makers in every student's life. And more often than not, those are parents. Hopefully, more often than not, those parents are in alignment with what they're looking for and what they want their kids' education to look like. If not, those things are hashed out outside of an ARC meeting and an IEP process. Those things are hashed out. You decide what you're going to do as far as custody and who's making those decisions. And then that person is responsible for coming into the meeting. That is a bit of a nuanced piece about Kentucky IEP advocate. There is a lot of hire an advocate, which is something that happens. That is just not something that I offer personally, because I do not, number one, have a schedule that would allow for that, as I am meeting with all of these people and also doing my other job But knowing that bringing somebody to a meeting, while it can feel really great to say, I'm bringing an advocate's not an attorney, so they cannot be interpreting rules and regulations. They cannot represent you or your child in a meeting. That's not what happens. If you want somebody with you who's going to help you feel better about not being alone, then bring somebody that you know who can come to this meeting with you and sit with you and be your hype girl and remind you that you're doing this for the right reason. Bring a therapist that your kid sees. I do go to meetings on behalf of the people that I see for therapy because I know them well. And I can give, a reasonable present level and what are we looking for and what are we moving towards. So that's another big takeaway is why do you want to bring somebody with you? Is it because you don't want to be alone? Then bring somebody who makes you more comfortable. And if you are looking for somebody, you're not going to impart any knowledge on the school district about what the policies and procedures are and what their job is. Those things already exist. They are well aware of them. Sometimes it can feel different when they know that you too are well aware of them. And then you can start moving in a more productive direction, hopefully.
I think that's another takeaway is you can bring someone with you, whether it is someone with the title of advocate like you, or whether it's someone else, the title of hype girl like me, or whoever. I think about it in terms of also, we've spent a lot of time, and I know a lot of people who've spent a lot of time like in and out of hospitals and doctors' offices. And like one of the most valuable things that I've learned along that process is like you can bring someone else with you that does nothing but like takes notes for you, because like you're absorbing so much, you're trying to figure out so much, you're like there's so much going on. Like having someone else there to just be a note taker and a question asker like is super helpful. Or just having someone like that like sit by your side while you're in an intimidating situation, I think is like just basic ground helpful. And
Mm-hmm.
I know Easter egg, we'll talk later in other episodes about like what this process looks like, how it gets started. Like we'll really get in the weeds of like gaps and needs and issues that come up and all of these things, because every life is different, every situation is different. We'll get into all of those things, but I think just kind of key takeaways from here being procedural safeguard notice is your parental rights. Keep everything in writing and feel free to bring someone else with you and have another set of eyes, and making sure that everything's written down, whether that's you taking notes, you get things in writing, or you've got someone else with you that's helping take notes. But get things in writing and keep them with you. That's really important as you kind of move through this process. Is there anything else like high level like that you can think of, like overarching little nuggets of wisdom that you would want to leave people with?
The last thing before we wrap up, as you're talking about taking notes, really good to be taking your own notes about this. Something different about Kentucky that we have that I don't know that any other state has. We don't have a prior written notice form. We have a conference summary report. So in the conference summary report, there is a written record of the meeting. So very nuanced, something to get to later. Those are notes taken by the school district. So you're going to get one side of this. It's very valuable to have them read at the end of the meeting. So maybe you could be like, you know what, but we did have a 10-minute discussion about me asking for this and you saying no. So where is that? We should have that in there. But that would be the last takeaway is notes are really important, and making sure that you're actively participating in the meeting just as much as everybody else is. If everybody's sharing information, then you too can share information because you as the parent are the expert on this kid. You've known this kid longer than anybody else in this room. Maybe that's my mic drop moment. You know this kid longer than anybody else, so don't let them tell you that they know your kid better than you know your kid.
That's why you're the greatest hype girl. And on that, if you have other questions in the meantime, check out our website, kyepadvocate.org. She's also on Facebook, KYEP Advocate, and Instagram, KYIEP Advocate. Am I missing anything there? Those are your three names. And YouTube now?
Those are, yes, we do have a YouTube channel. Yes, this will be on YouTube.
Yeah. Essentially just search KYEP Advocate and you'll find the things that she has put out into the world to be of
Yeah,
assistance.
big plug for our marketing girl who's done all of our websites and SEO. If you start searching Kentucky documents, a lot of times our website shows up before the Department of Education's website shows up. So
Interesting.
nice job, Cruise PR.
Shout out Misty. Great job.